How do we, when we're given a question, when we're given a technical question, let's be more specific, when we're given a technical question, how do we approach it? What questions should we ask? What should we think about? Just where do we even begin? Like, what's the right thing to do? So today I'm going to walk through what I do. And again, there's different approaches that people have and other programmers and coders out there may have. But if you're struggling, if you're need some guidance on the best possible approach to problems like this, I hope this video can be helpful to you, and I hope that you will also have tools that you can use for your next interview. So when I'm given a question, first of all, before we even look at the question, I time myself. That helps me, that adds pressure. That's one of the things that we have in interviews. It also adds a cutoff point where I'm going to stop looking at this question after this point. So it allows me to not just keep working on a question when I do have other responsibilities in life. It allows me to keep on with my day because Lord knows if I get stuck on a question, I'm just going to keep on trying to figure it out. So I usually have a timer. Just in regular interviews, you're going to be timed usually for the question, and also, you want to get these questions kind of have a set pace at the rate that you're answering these questions, and try to keep up with that pace. So I usually have a 25-minute timer in a separate tab. I won't do that right now, but just a 25-minute timer, and I set that and start it. So the first thing that I do when I get a question is I obviously read the question. So I see that, it says you are given an n by n 2D matrix representing an image. Rotate the image by 90 degrees clockwise. You have to rotate the image in place, which means you have to modify the input 2D matrix directly. Do not allocate another 2D matrix and do the rotation. And then we have a couple examples here. Reading the question really helps me decipher what to work on. And if you're struggling with what to do, I would say read the question and take key points from the question, right? So I see an n by n 2D matrix. I see rotate by 90 degrees clockwise. I see I have to rotate in place, modify the input 2D matrix directly, and I cannot allocate another 2D matrix to do the rotation. So I see a lot of keywords that hint me on what I need to do, on the algorithms that I can choose, right? It's usually in the question, and it helps me kind of narrow down what I need to work on. And so the first thing is have a timer. The second thing that I do, well, let's go back to step 0. Before we even get to the question, I usually have a table of usually a Google Excel sheet, or if you use like a notes program that has a table, or Notion, if that's you create a database in Notion. But what you want to do is basically for each problem that you do, you want to describe in quick words what you did to solve the problem and patterns that you see, that you used, algorithms that you use for that question, and data structures that you use, the time complexity and the space complexity. What that does is that allows you to create a database for your personal interview style and how you like to answer questions, and keywords that can really help you relate to other questions that you answered previously. Because a lot of questions, there's only so many questions that an interviewer can ask, right? There's just so many. There's not an infinite number of questions, right? And so if we know that, we can kind of lean back on our understanding of certain keywords. So when we have the timer, we have we read the question, and because we have that database of all the questions that we've answered previously, we can now say, hey, I solved a similar 2D matrix question previously, and I used this algorithm. And does that apply here? Hey, another question in my database used in place. Does that apply here? And so now you're connecting different questions. And so now you're picking up patterns. You're picking up common patterns. And this is a must if you, I believe, and this is a must for me. This is how I really am able to solve these questions more easily, is because of this database. Um, so once I have that, I don't even think about code yet, right? I don't even think about code. Once I've read the question, I don't think about code yet. I think about, okay, how can I do this? How would I do this? In code, right? So I'm not thinking about writing code right now. What I'm thinking about is what can I do to solve this? And so I go through the examples, or I build examples on my own and ask the interviewer, hey, is this the right answer? And I try to see, okay, maybe I can do X, Y, and Z to get me to this answer. I'm not even thinking about writing code right now. So that allows me to have it in my head the approach that I'm going to take, right? You want to have and it helps me to have a plan, to have an action when I start coding. Somewhat, right? I don't need to, because I want to get it. I don't want to take all day, right? If it's an easy question, if I don't need to get everything right perfectly, I can kind of tweak as I go. I don't need to do the waterfall method to make sure every single thing is laid out, but just have some idea of the algorithm before I just get into code, because code is really hard to change if you don't know what you're doing, at least for myself, right? If I'm confused, the code is really hard to change. And so what I like to do is really make sure that I understand an algorithm or a brute force solution or anything like that. And so I think about, hey, are there data structures that I can use? Are there algorithms that I can use? Hey, I'm going to take certain things from the question and see if they apply to this algorithm that I can use. And so for this question, I've already solved this question, as I said, and I'll show the code in a second. But the code is not the point, right? It's not about the code. It's about the approach that I would take. So, and I'll do this live for a question that I haven't seen before, so you all can see that process as well. But for this one, my thinking was in place. This sentence right here, this in place was really key, right? When you're doing anything in place, it creates a challenge, right? Because we could create another array that has these characteristics, right? Easily. At least I thought. We could just create that array, submit it, return it. We're all good. But no, right? We have to do that in place, which is why this is a medium question. And so there's different ways you can approach this problem. Usually there is. There's more efficient, more time efficient, or space efficient ways. Um, and so, should I show you? Should I show you all my solution? Um, I will. I will. What my first thought was, could I potentially put? So my first thought was the rows and columns idea, right? This 1, 2, 3, this row 1, 2, 3 becomes this column 1, 2, 3 like that. This 4, 5, 6 becomes this column 4, 5, 6. This row 7, 8, 9 becomes this column 7, 8, 9. So if you could do it, I'm pretty sure there's a solution where you could do it like that, right? Where you could take the rows 1, 2, 3 and put them as columns in the 2D array, but you would have to store 3, 6, 9. You would have to figure that out, that complexity out, and it's not too complex, but you would just have to figure that logic out of how that actual storing, because you don't want to lose the information since we're doing it in place. That's the tricky part. That's the complex part. You're going to lose information once you put where the new value should be. So, store the row or store the column or something like that. That could be an option. And there's different ways you can handle that. Um, and this is kind of a novel way, maybe, or a unique way if you haven't thought about this, or maybe your mind went straight to this. But I thought, I see that if I see that there's kind of a what if I pick up a number and put it in the proper place, and then pick up that number and put that number in its proper place. So like one, right? One's proper place should be here, right? As we see, goes here. One's proper place is here. So then three's proper place is here. Then nine's proper place is here. Then seven proper place is here. So you can see how there's like a chain in that. And then I move to two, right? Two's proper place is here. Six here. Eight here. Four here. Then I just completed all these squares, and then I don't need to touch 5. And then the same thing here. I do 5, I do 1, I do 9, and I don't need to touch 11. Then I move to this inner square, this 4, 8, and I only have to do 4, right? I only have to move 4 here, I only have to move 8 here, I only have to move 6 here, and 3 here. And so that was what my mind went to when I created the solution. And so that was kind of my approach. And that's key, because when I show you the code, it might be, confusing, or you might be confused by it. But the big thing, that's my approach. And so again, could this code be cleaned up? Yes. It's definitely not perfect. The variable usage was kind of tricky. But the big thing that I want to hint or give you all is that when you finish a question, right, when you submit it, when you got it working, the main thing that you want to do is put that back into the database and look at other solutions by other people and add those solutions in the database also, with the patterns that are used, with the algorithms, data structures that are used. And now you're building a kind of database of these questions, or of these problems. And so that gives you a database to look back on when you encounter this question again. And so the purpose of this video was to give you kind of what to think about when you're looking at a question. I know this was kind of all over the place. I hope this was helpful. I can go into this question, I can go into the code, I can do a brand new question and try to solve it live. Also, there's many different video ideas I had, but this one main purpose was to give you tools that you can use. So to just go over the tools one more time, this video is getting long. The first step is, or step 0 if you say, you have to have, or I have a question bank, right? And I have a question bank specifically in Notion, which I could go over also, right? My question bank, what I have, the fields. But I have that question bank. I also time myself. So for each question, I time myself. Oh, so that was one. That was step 0. That was one. Step 2 is I have a good question bank. I'm not doing questions that don't pertain to what I'm trying to do, right? I'm only doing questions that are recommended, that are really beneficial, that have the most bang from my buck. So I use question list, I use blind 75, I use different question lists that people have made to give me the biggest bang for my buck. So I'm not just doing questions that I'll never see, or practicing things that I'll never reach. So that's step 2. Step 0, question bank. 1, time yourself. 2, use a question list. 3, read the question. 4, identify key concepts. Identify key concepts and and keywords that I see that remind me back in my question bank. Then after that, I create a general approach. I go through examples and try to figure out a general approach that I can use to basically start coding with. I don't need it to get it perfect, but what I do is try to have a idea that I just explained to this question, what I did of picking up the number and putting it in its proper place. All of this code here is based on that idea. That's all I did. And so I know it looks crazy, and then you have to get into how do you translate that idea into code, which takes some practice, which takes some learning. So that's where it comes from. But that's the basics of what I did. So again, I hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.